Hello, and welcome to my channel. My name is Tycho, and today I'll be painting a portrait of my original character Terran using a pre-made skin color palette by the artist Navate, as well as painting his hair in Photoshop. If you're interested in learning how to paint skin and hair the way that I do, stick around. Before we get started, I just wanted to mention that I have a Discord where I share art resources, and I'll put the link to join in the description below if you're interested. Terran is the main character from my book Court of Snakes, This Desert Cage, and he's a prince whose throne has been usurped. The book covers 3 years of his life while he works for the leader of a rebellion, learning magic with tarot cards and trying to take his throne back from those who betrayed him. Terran is also canonically ace and arrow, so there's no forced love interest in this book. I absolutely love Terran to death. He is kind of an understated character, and I know people like his counterpart Parissa more, but Terran is still definitely very near and dear to my heart. So let's get started with talking about the painting process. I begin by creating a new layer, and I obviously have laid down the flats in the last video. If you haven't seen it, I'll link it in the description below, or you can check out the card that popped up on the screen to go and watch that one. Once my flat colors are down, I use the color palette that I have, the Navate palette, to lay down basic tones, lights, and shadows onto Terran's face. Then I use the rest of the pre-made palette to lay down not only darker lights and shadows, but also alternate colors as well. These alternate colors include reds and purples and also yellows too, depending on what kind of skin tone you're using for your character. The Navate palette has a great range of skin tones, but I personally like to modify it a little bit. I do find that some of the yellow skin tones can look a little uncanny valley, maybe a little unnatural. Also, some of the darker skin tones don't have as much warmth or blues that I want, depending on what I'm working with. So I add in a little bit of blue and purple to balance it out. I typically put these shades along the jawline if you have a character who is an older gentleman in particular, because facial hair is a thing. I also use blue to highlight veins and undertones on particularly translucent characters. This is a great technique if you have an undead character or a fairy character. Finally, I'll put a little bit of purple under the eyes and also on the fingernails as well, just to give it a little bit of life. Once I am kind of in the process of working on the base color for Terran's skin, I add in some shadows and highlights to make sure I'm creating that depth and dimension. It's really important to pay attention to lighting in reference photos that you're using, if you are using one, to make sure that your shadows and highlights are in the right places. Once I'm happy with the skin tone, I move on to painting Terran's hair. I'm not a huge fan of this pre-made color palette that I have for hair, so I modify it pretty heavily to get the color that I want. I think the person that made the palette originally used it for anime art, which is fine, but that results in some of the hair tones being a little bit flat. I like to go in to the roots of the hair and add in some darker and brighter colors, and I also like to create a little bit of variation in the actual hair strands themselves with the colors that I'm using. Typically with this color palette as well, I also have to go much darker than what the color palette allows for. So definitely, if it feels like it needs to be darker, don't be afraid to get in there and do what you need to do. Typically, I start by blocking in the base color of the hair, and then I'll add in some highlights and shadows to create texture and depth. I like to use effectively the same brush for my entire piece. So I'm using Kyle Webster's gouache wet brush, and I literally use it for everything. Depending on the hair and if it is textured or curly hair or not, sometimes I will use other brushes, but for the most part, one brush, entire painting. I'm a pretty simple guy. I don't like to switch around brushes all the time. As I'm painting, also, I like to just zoom in and out to make sure everything looks good at different levels of detail, so I'm so sorry if that's annoying, because I know for recording purposes it can get pretty crazy when I'm just zooming in and out. It is really important, though, to make sure that when you're working digitally, you do step back from your work. I know traditionally it's a lot easier to just kind of stand up and walk away from your desk and look and make sure that your work looks okay from a distance. But with digital, because we sit so close to our monitor, it's definitely easy to forget that you need to step back. So I'll often zoom out and squint at my work to make sure it looks okay. Everybody works a little bit differently, but that's what I do. Definitely also, take breaks. Give your eyes a rest, because looking at monitors is brutal. It's really, really bad, actually, for your eyeballs, and I'm definitely the worst person to be giving this advice, but I sit at my monitor way too much, and your eyes get tired, so make sure you take breaks, rest your eyes, use light-blocking glasses or UV-blocking glasses if you can, and protect your eyes as much as possible, so that way you can make sure that your art looks as good as it possibly can. At the very least, I'm really glad that people seemed to like this particular piece for the Kickstarter a lot. They really liked that I included postcards of both of the characters. They were like little mini art prints, effectively, and I still give them away if people purchase copies of my books when I'm at conventions. Court of Snakes is a super awesome title if you like books like The Hunger Games or Divergent. In the city of Sageno, it's eat or be eaten. Someone has to rule the masses. A boy has lost his birthright, his parents killed, dead, and gone. A girl has lost her father, she means nothing to him now. The city of Sageno stands tall after a great war, the only city left of its kind. Terran has lost both of his parents and is now on the run from a tyrant eager to kill him and cut off the royal bloodline. Parissa struggles with her own identity, as even her father rejects her for the color of her skin as he claws for the throne. Along their journeys, they meet unexpected allies and encounter unprecedented magic, but most importantly, they learn what it is to stand up for themselves and take back their city from corruption. It's got a lot of really cool themes in there. It touches a little bit on racism and also on conspiracy theories. It also covers poverty, corruption, and effectively, it's kind of a look at what would happen if we put the worst people in control of a really small area and then just let them do whatever they wanted. It's a good book, and I'm a little biased. I really like my own book, but if you like The Hunger Games and you like Divergent, you should definitely check it out. If you're interested in checking out my book, Court of Snakes, This Desert Cage, I'll put the link to purchase it on Amazon in the description below. If you enjoyed this video, please hit like, subscribe, and the bell icon to get notifications when I post new content. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.